Beautiful.
Very nice.
Very well done.
Thank
Maybe
you.
the best we've ever seen.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
The Hall of Fame.
I'll take the gold star.
Okay, welcome to the Nothing to Prove, Only to Share podcast.
Right on. Happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, the claps just like bring the energy for me. Okay, this week's guest is Jeff Bailey. Hey.
Hey.
So, Jeff was my teacher at Hamlin. That's how we met.
Correct.
And I was just thinking, I was talking to Aurelia and Richard this morning when we got in, that I don't think I really know that much about you. Like, I feel...
That's also correct.
Yeah. There's obviously a comfort and a familiarity, but I don't think I really know... Like, I don't think I know where you're from or, like, how you got started.
Yes. Okay. The backstory. I actually am a St. Paul kid.
Nice.
I grew up in St. Paul, a couple different locations. I went to a school that was pretty incredible called Webster Magnet. That I think it was on Holly, kind of Selbydale, Grandendale neighborhood. At the time, it was pre what now would be considered maybe a charter school or some kind of a focused immersion school. There were all sorts of, there was the regular math, English, business, but there were dozens and dozens, maybe like 40, 50, what they called applied skills. So you could take pottery or calligraphy. Cool. You could learn Hmong language.
Whoa.
You could take, Spanish. You could do guitar. You could take, you could learn how to make your own backpack and live like in a tent for, it was just crazy.
That's awesome.
So tons of stuff. And it was a incredibly rich environment for creativity. And a lot of my, I feel very fortunate that a lot of my inner circle kind of first ring friends are from that area, from that time period.
My high school, it was band, choir, shop, or home ec.
Oh, dig. I remember going one time, I was not in this class, but the workshop, like the shop guy was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm in trouble." He's like, "Come here." He brought us into this other room where they had a cockpit of an airplane.
Bro.
And he was a pilot, and maybe we went to summer school or something like that. And every day he would get in and show us, like we'd get to fly, all the gauges work. So you'd pull it was just a really interesting, I think Channel 2 donated some actual TV cameras. So we had like a TV studio where you'd pretend to do a newscast. You'd use small cameras and do claymation. It was crazy.
Dude.
So that was my early pinnings. And then I went to a school called Highland Park, which is on Snelling Avenue. Again, I was a band geek, like super duper geek. So I was a trumpet kid. Cool. And so I did kind of traditional band. Somewhere in the middle of that, I decided I wanted to either play guitar or bass. And I went to, what's it called? Cadenza Music on Snelling, and with my lawn mowing money, and I said, I think I want to play guitar or bass. And there was a husband-wife team that ran Gene. We'll get back to Gene in a moment. And Gene said, "You should play bass. There's way more gigs."
Word.
So as this 15-year-old, I took home a bass. All I could afford was the instrument, no case. I just was walking down the street. And fast forward many years later, I was playing with Irv Williams, who's since passed away. He lived to 100. He was amazing, this great tenor saxophone player. And I look out and I went up to this guy on break. I was like, "Are you Gene?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm Gene." I was like, "You kind of have a big part in why I'm playing bass." And he said, "I'm actually here because I saw your name in the paper. And you and your sister," now this is me at the time, maybe in my early 40s. So 30 years have gone by. And he said, "My wife won't let me take this credit off our payroll. You guys have credits for when you used to take trumpet lessons. Can you come and buy?"
Oh my goodness.
I was like, "Whoa, you've kept a $12 credit on your books for 30 years?
Oh my goodness.
Crazy." So anyways, when I was in high school, I met a bunch of kids. So I ended up, in homeroom, you kind of go alphabetical order. And the kid next to me in the row was this kind of skateboard punk kid, and so we're kind of eyeballing each other a little bit. And so finally we're like, who the fuck are you? Like, what is it? And he's like, "My name's Martin McKinney." And so we became like super great friends, started a band together with this other guy named Malo. Ended up winning Best New Band of the Twin Cities when we were kind of still in high school. And Malo now lives in London and does TV jingle music. And Martin McKinney ended up to go on. He's Doc Martin, who has Grammys with Drake, and he's the one who busted The Weeknd with House of Balloons. He moved to Toronto.
Wow.
And so that's our little pod, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an all right friend to have.
Yeah. Somewhere in there, Doc and I were roommates when I was in college. I went to the U of M for a while, and I have absolutely no problem articulating my disappointment in their system at the time. I think now, talking with a couple of people who work there, they're trying to change it, but basically was told this mantra that I've heard a number of places in more traditional institutions that, well, yes, I love that you play jazz or that you're playing rock music or whatever, but we know, wink, wink, that the true metrics of someone's talent is the classical repertoire, right? We know that. And then I'm just like, blah, you know, ensue the Tasmanian devil conversations of like, no, that's not what it is. And my challenge to them, as it is to my, you know, like, I have had friends in my life that are amazing jazz players that kind of poo-poo pop music. And I'm like, well, you should try it. Let's see how that works. You should play a Metallica song. Let's see how that goes for you. Or let me drop you off in Jamaica and see if you get a gig. Like, your skill, I guess your ability to be successful is predicated on more than just skill. It's predicated on your willingness to dive in and absorb the influences and the legacy of each genre. So, back to the U, I left kind of in protest because they were trying to have me do certain classical things that I just wasn't interested. They wanted a jazz major to do everything their classical bass players do and just add on like a couple semesters of jazz, because that will be, you know, it's like, get out of here. So I just went and found the kind of the old guard, the old curmudgeonous guys, and I just bugged the shit out of them, you know? And
That's
I said,
exactly what Nick said last week.
Yeah, and I said, like, I'm not leaving till you, like, invite me over to your house for a session. I'll buy you lunch, whatever. And they would, you know, someone would make me cassette tapes or hand me a record and be like, what do you mean you don't know Benny Golson? Like, what? Check out this record. Like, what do you mean you don't have this Max Roach record? Like, you're a dummy. Go check it out, you know? And so I just spent, you know, years and really under their tutelage, and a couple players in particular that I'll mention, of just really understanding how essential the sensibility of oral skills and immediacy of jazz music. James Blood Ulmer is this kind of avant-garde guitar player, played with Ronald Shannon Jackson's group and Jamaluddin Takuma, but he had this song that said, "Jazz is the teacher, funk is the preacher." Like everything has a role, you know. So my diving into jazz serves me now even more so, even if, you know, even if I'm not playing jazz, I can transcribe really quickly. So I'm like, oh, so sometimes, you know, you put a record on or just, you know, something in the car and you're like, okay, well, I don't have perfect pitch, but once I figure out the key, I hear it goes 1, it's 1/3, 4, minor 4, 2, 5, 1. Oh, there's a tritone, that's interesting. It's the second time before the pre, you know, so there's just a set, so I can kind of organize my brain in that way because of jazz, the vehicle of jazz.
Yeah, I had that experience.
Yeah.
When I started teaching myself jazz, I'm a drummer.
Yeah.
And like just notating, even just playing blues.
Anything.
A 12 bar became so easy.
So easy, yeah. And the willingness to do the shed work of, I'm going to sit down and for 5 hours, I'm going to try to hear, transcribe, play, articulate as much of this Hank Mobley sax solo as possible, or Miles, or Coltrane, or whoever it is, Wayne Shorter, Kenny Barron. I did a lot of transcriptions of. Like, my goal, even on bass, is to mimic you. You know, so this idea that we know the foundation, we understand modes now, we understand relative minor, 2-5-1s, and all flat nines. What is all that? Okay, that's still just skill. That's still just understanding the formulas and the processes. And then the next level is, do I have capacity to emulate at a really high level? Because those skills get put into motion if you're emulating. And then, so I understand the basics, then I emulate. And through that, I can make a lot of choices as I create, or am a creator, you know? So that's kind of my mindset. Even as an educator, just like, hey, you are deficient in your basic skills. So that base level of the pyramid, we need to do that or else it's all going to fall apart. Because you don't have a capacity to engage in some visceral or immediate level if you don't have these core base skills, you know? And so even if, as I was touring, you know, earlier in life when I did a lot of touring around the States and around the world, you know, any jam session you go to, anyone you meet, as soon as you start playing, you get those acknowledgement eyes like, oh, yeah, he knows. Okay, cool. He knows what. And then they'll you know, do some altered chords or something.
Yeah.
Did he catch that? Oh, yeah, he did catch that. Okay, you're it, you know? And the people who don't, they get kicked off the stage, you know?
Definitely.
Like establishing that trust. Like when you play with someone new, it's you got to establish trust.
Absolutely.
And you build on it.
And the collaboration, I teach this class called Creative Collaboration, and it's informed by my partner is this gangster director and actor in town, Austin Van. She's been a Penumbra Theater, which is kind of the longest lasting, most definable black theater company in the U.S., Penumbra. That's in St. Paul. She's been a company member for decades and decades, but also she has her own. She's artistic director of Yellow Tree, but she also just got done directing Skeleton Crew at the Guthrie.
Cool.
And I was composing for one of her theater shows one time, and she said, you know, we should have a talk. And I was like, uh-oh. I must have totally fucked up. Like, what happened? And she said, which is true about jazz, and it's true about pop writing, it's true about groups, and it's one of the core issues that gets kind of turned sideways and gets triggered and things come out sideways. And she said, collaboration is not democracy. And I was like, like, what? I was like, yeah, but I'm like a composer, so I'm doing my thing, right? And she's like, yep. And also nope. Because, you know, for people who aren't invested in music in the way we are, they listen in a totally different way. Yeah. They're not like, oh, that's so cool, polychord, oh, listen to the strings, whatever. They're just like, it should move me, it should speak to me. Those are all very non-tangibles. It could be the hippest chord progression in the world, the greatest programming, the greatest bass playing, but who cares? If it doesn't speak to you, it doesn't speak to you. So my collaboration working with dancers and theater people also taught me this other idea of like, I also have a responsibility. I guess this is also speaks to higher ability and this idea of building your portfolio in many different ways. So I'm a performing artist and I do touring. I also do recording. I also do composing. I also, you know, that kind of thing. So later, I mean, more recently in my life, I started working with Charles Lazarus, who's a trumpet player with the Minnesota Orchestra. And he reached out. We started playing with him, and then he said, myself and a piano player, Tommy Barbarella, who's incredible, you know, he's like, I need you guys to write music for my original record. And he's a writer as well, so he writes some, but, you know, you can't write 12 songs and be a classical musician in the Minnesota Orchestra. It's too taxing. So we would write stuff. But again, going back to this idea of like collaboration is there's freedom and there's an onus on you to steer your creativity in the direction of the goal of the person that's hiring you. You know, I can sit in my studio all day and write hopefully amazing music that appeals to me. But if I'm being hired, if I'm being asked to be a collaborator, then I also have to have part of my vision set on what the ask is. And I think that Tommy being, you know, obviously he toured with Prince for forever and then did 20 some years as a commercial writer. But in the last 10, 15 years, he's been writing orchestral charts for the Minnesota Orchestra, for Chuck Lazarus, but also for other shows that come in. You know, he just has that capacity. So here's this person that, you know, had classical lessons and jazz lessons as a kid, toured the world with Prince, and like legacy when Sonny and Michael and Levi and that whole era, that was the new power generation proper, like the group. And then comes off that and distills those tools and goes, I'm going to figure out what orchestration means, you know? And because he's a piano player and he just put in the time and now he's doing it at a very high level, which is beautiful. But I think that goes to the idea of being a skilled person and being thoughtful or mindful or deliberate about the way that you collaborate with your skill set, you know?
Totally. I like that. Do you have words?
Dude, well, mine's kind of zapped. That was amazing.
Yeah. I was thinking about how just how like the more you work on all the other things, all the little things or the separate things, how they strengthen your skills in other places. And I think you talked a little bit about that. I've been playing piano or trying to learn how to play, and I've like owned a guitar since I was like, I don't know, 13, and I hadn't picked up the guitar in a long time. But after spending like some really intentional time with the piano, picking up the guitar was just like so, it felt so easy, breezy, and I think that's so cool. And I think that's how it goes with everything. Like the more time I spend writing, all of it just kind of like intertwines.
I mean, during COVID, one of the crews, the collection of people I met, I was out in LA with Doc. We were doing writing sessions, kind of right as COVID was, we were kind of coming out of shelter in place, and my former job as a department head at a place called McNally Smith College of Music, that college imploded, and he was like, "Great, you're unemployed. We can do friend stuff again."
Yeah, you lost your job.
Yeah. So we were out there, and he, had this amazing place, and we were doing writing sessions, and he introduced me to Ali Shaheed Muhammad, who was the guy who did most of the beats for Tribe Called Quest back in the day, and his partner still, this guy named Andrew Young, and Ali Shaheed Muhammad's still doing beats, but he also plays electric bass. And Andrew is this kind of very well known. If you're not following him on Instagram, it's one that you should. But he had this challenge during COVID of 90 days. It was like new instrument 90 days. I can't remember what he called it. But this idea that if we internalize the way that we're thinking about music, then the instrument doesn't matter. Because, like you said, when you play piano, your guitar playing gets easier. If you play a ton of guitar, your piano playing comes, because you're thinking about relationships of even, on the guitar, it's hard to build chords out of thirds because you start running out of chord shapes, For a lot of guitar players, they come up and their teachers just teach them the shapes and they just move them around. I remember there was this kid at McNally who's an amazing player, and I was his advisor for this kind of special recording project he wanted to do. And he sent me his charts, and I was like, this doesn't sound like the recording at all. Like, what's going on? I'm not trying to shame him, I'm thinking about it. And then I realized he's writing the chord of the shape he's playing, but he has a capo. Or he's playing like a G shape, but he's playing it up at B flat. So he's naming it a G, but he's not thinking musically. He's thinking a shape.
Yeah.
And I think patterns are, they're great. They're an easy fix for music teachers. I think it gets you to a win quickly. I think the negative side of that is you don't ask young, interested musician learners to engage in the language of music. You're engaging them in a shape. And because they make a shape, they feel like a win. And then you go like, hey, do all that chord but the major 7. And they don't I have no idea what that means. It's just shape or it's not. I move the capo up and I play the shape. So this idea that we can teach ourselves piano, we can teach ourselves guitar. And that was what Andrew was saying. So he's like, who knows how long we're going to be in this thing back in 2020, whenever, it was like, pre everything. Everyone's like, we're not even sure what it is. He's like, just order an instrument from Amazon, order a flute, order a violin, and look online, get some basic, starter points, and then just play around with the instrument 3 hours a day for 90 days while we're in this thing. And I bet if you're a musician already, you'll pick up 1 or 2 new instruments. So he plays, all the instruments. His original beginnings, he was more of a DJ and beat maker, but he realized philosophically he loved the sounds from the old records, from the Motown records, from the Blue Note records. Like, how do they get that richness? How do they get that analog sound? So he was like, well, he's a very driven guy. And he was like, well, then I'm going to teach myself all the instruments and teach myself how to engineer on 2-inch tape.
That's right.
And then I'm going to create the music that I love for samples. But instead of doing samples, I'm just going to play it all. It's like, yeah.
That's real.
That's
how you do that.
That's really real. Yeah.
Crazy.
So I can't remember what his studio's. something Labs. Yeah, just look them up online. It's incredible. But that team, Alicia Muhammad and Andrew, did the music for Luke Cage, which was one of the Marvel things on HBO for a while. So they were doing that and then touring as a band, and Jazz is Dead was kind of their big banner. Anyways.
Cool.
That's making me think a lot about trying to teach myself bass, you know, because when I got this P bass not too long ago, and I only bought it for like recording purposes, like in my little studio. You know, someone else would play it, be playing, someone who knows how to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm a drummer. I want to know how to play bass because I like having notes. And for a while, I was like looking up tabs for songs, and I figured I'd just sort of pick it up through osmosis. But what I found was I wasn't really learning how a fretboard works, like how the notes work with each other. I was just learning numbers on a screen, and like putting my fingers where they were telling me, and I wasn't actually learning bass.
Right.
So it's been kind of maybe a journey, I guess, of like fretboard, learning the actual notes and learning how they interact with each other.
I mean, I play guitar, but I'm not a guitar player. I play piano, but I'm not a piano player. I mean, I can program and create and write and all those things. But in my mind, it's like, well, if I learn basic chords and scales, I'm still not a player, right? Because I'm not, to me, when I hear Kaviesh or Tommy B or any number of amazing piano players in town, the stuff that defines them, either as a player or stylistically, are the notes that happen in transitions. You know, you always hear boom, boom, but ba-do, chord. So that ba-do, you know, that's the shit that's magical and starts to feel like there's life in a track. I mean, I'm a frustrated drummer. It's like, I can play beats. I can't play like you. I can't play like Richard. It's like bananas. But I can think about the center of the groove and go, okay, I'm just going to do that. You know, I'm going to play that thing. Yeah. But everyone can do that, or most beginning drummers can do that. The stuff that makes you or Richard or Kevin Washington or JT Bates or Shooty or anyone in town or anywhere. Like, what's Gene Lake and, you know, what's Steve Gadd? It's like the sound is also their choices about how to fill the space between the static grooves. Big fills, small grooves, you know, like what kind of fills, what kind of, how are they tuning? Total sidebar. So I was on tour in Japan at one point, and the drummer, Rich Mercurio, is from New York, great drummer. And the Yamaha company is there. It's based in Japan, and one of their reps came to talk to him. And after our sound check, we went out to eat, and then the next day we flew from like Fukuoka to Osaka or something. We flew somewhere. We got there, and he sat down. He's like, "What the hell?" And we're like, "What's wrong?" And he's like, "The drums are perfect," which never happens. And then the piano player's like, "What's going on?" And on his organ was a pick. That's not a big deal. It was a pick that was in the exact location of the pick from last night's gig in a different city. Whoa. So I went up to our record liaison. I was like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Well, after you leave, after sound check, we go and take pictures of everyone's station with a ruler."
What?
So that we know how far back to set your monitor from your mic stand. And this guy from Yamaha has perfect pitch. And he comes and records the pitch of every lug.
Wow.
On every drum. Top and bottom. So he invited him to the Yamaha like display, whatever the bill. He came back. He's like, "Here, play Jack DeJohnette's drum. Doink. That sounds like Jack. Play Steve Gadd snare. Doink. Yeah." Because he has a card with every pitch. So after someone tunes their drum, he records all the pitches that are your way of hearing how the drum should be strung, or tuned. And then he comes in and pre-tunes every lug with this card. So when you show up, you don't need 45 minutes. You're not pressing on the heads. You're not, they're in the shape that you typically, that's your starting place.
Yeah.
Which I thought was like.
That's fascinating. That would almost just be fun to see, like, what do I tune mine to? Like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, I mean, there's every drummer I've talked, I mean, I'm so greedy about information. When drummers come over and record in my studio, I'm always like, "So why are you doing it? And what's going on? And why do you do that? And why are you not tuning the bottom of the floor top? No, that's fine. I do this." Some people are like loose bottom, tight top. Some are the other way. Some just all the changes, but it's fascinating. And sometimes completely different processes get almost sonically the same result, which is maybe our best metaphor for shut up and do your thing. Like, who knows how we get there, but each drummer has their own system. Each bass player has, do you play high, I play a lot of acoustic bass, so my electrics, the action for me feels better when it's a little higher. But people who tend to only play electric feel like it's too high. But because I play so much acoustic, it just is better for resistance for me. But one of my mentors, Tony Axtell, plays his strings like on the frets, but he's one of the baddest dudes I've ever heard in my whole life. On bass, drums, guitar, piano, voice, engineering. Like, he's just cold-blooded. That's his way of doing things,
Yeah, everyone's got a way.
Which I should just also say, another sidetrack, which is condolences and thoughts to our friends. Joey Elliott is a guitar player in town. Tony Axtell are two people who had been in recent years touring with Dave Sanborn, who just passed away. So they're going through it. So thinking about those guys.
For sure. Richard, did you have something to say?
I did have something to say. The Dave Sanborn thing made me sad.
Yeah, right.
That dude was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking about, the idea that you could go and hit a drum that was tuned exactly like another drum will sound like that drummer, But I was just going to say, on the flip side, there's stories of like Steve Gadd sitting in on drums on someone else's drum set, and then he sits down and then he plays, and all of a sudden it sounds like a million times better because it's Steve Gadd playing. You know what I mean? The same set of drums. Or I can't tell you how many times I've played someone else's kit, and someone's like, oh, it just sounds like you, like it could be a thing. And I've noticed that with a lot of players. And I would say, for just to keep the subject on topic, which is Jeff Bailey, I've seen
This guy.
Jeff play an assortment of basses, and on every one, sounds like Jeff, right? Like there's a world of, like, no matter how much you emulate the setup of the instrument, that the true sound of the instrument always seems to come out of the player.
Tone is in the fingers, right?
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
Or even like their choice, like what Jeff was saying, like this one bass player who plays on a certain position, right? Like right on the frets. Like even how musicians tend to hit their instruments or strike their instruments or interact physically with their instruments, like all of those, where their timing lies can have an effect on the tone because it like affects the part that you hear,
Yeah.
all those things like add up, but it popped in my head when you guys were talking about it.
Love.
I know I was at a clinic years ago with Ray Brown, big influence on me, great jazz bass player. And his quarter note is so recognizable. You can hear like 2-3 measures and you're like, oh, that's Ray. Like everyone just knows it's Ray, which sounds totally different than kind of my other two big influences when I was much younger, which is like Mr. Ron Carter and like Paul Chambers, different quarter note length. So he would, he'd play and the kids are like, well, I don't have a $10,000 Juzak bass or whatever. And he's like, well, give me your shitty $1,200 plywood, and just boom. And and it is in the hands. The other thing it made me think of is my friend of mine was recording a record and they brought in Charlie Drayton, great drummer, really, pretty well-known drummer. And at first they were kind of like, okay, like it's taking a long time. Let's get going. And he's like, can I hear the chorus again? Let me just get that. Oh, can I hear that again? And they're like, what else is going on with this guy? And he took like 35, 40 minutes tuning drums, playing the chorus again. Can I hear the pre-chorus? Doink, 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 doink. And then my friend, they recorded the song and he literally just kind of put the faders up all at unity, and the dynamics were all there. Didn't need to be automated or mixed. And he had, like DJs do now when they're creating beats, they'll tune their low end, whether it's 808s or kicks, to the key of the song. So he was tuning all his drums so that they resonated in the key of the chorus, the biggest, most important part. And then he'd do that for every track. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, there's this other level. And I know Jorge, not Roeder, the bass player, who am I thinking of? Jorge Rossi, that used to play with Brad Meldau. he would pick specific cymbals depending on the bass player, so that the ring of the cymbal had some relationship with the length of the quarter note of the bass player.
Whoa,
I've never heard that one before.
Yeah.
I know.
That's a new one.
Crazy.
interesting.
Yeah.
So many name drops too. Like I'm gonna be taking notes when I edit this
Yeah, right.
episode.
I'm thinking like, who don't you know?
Yeah.
Like who haven't you met? Where haven't you been?
Or worked with, yeah.
You're like, I'm touring in Japan and like whatever. What is that? It's no
Yeah.
big deal.
I mean, there's also like completely guerrilla warfare touring Europe in a car with, a Italian piano player and just playing these incredible gigs in piazzas, but like packing up and getting back into the car, and, but music is this energy and it's this power, Even there, I remember we're in some small town in Italy, and I was walking around. I looked up and I saw like a Chicago Bulls backboard over this wall, and I was just taking a picture because the town was so scenic, so beautiful, but it was a very small town. So it seemed odd. It was a cool juxtaposition.
Yeah.
As I'm taking the picture, this woman comes up to me and I'm like, I think I offended her. And she's like, please, 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 come. And I was like, what's going on? That was her house. She opens the gate. We walk into the courtyard. She has me sit down. She brings out cheese, grapes, olives, wine. She's like, my son will be home soon. He speaks good English, So finally he comes. I'm like, why do you have this backboard, And she's like, well, he's really good at soccer and basketball. In fact, we've been to the U.S. twice, once in New York and once to Blaine, Minnesota,
What?
where they have this huge soccer compound. Like, I think it's like 10, 12, 14 fields that they do all these competitions at. So that's this idea of like, part of why I loved touring in those days was that you meet people through music that you wouldn't meet if you were just being a tourist. There's some other entryway into that experience. And like, I remember that after that gig, the dinner felt like I was in Stanley Tucci's Big Night, like these brothers were just making pasta. And I'm, of course, a little anal. And I was like, hey, I think we're supposed to play. The guy at the end of the table is like, I'm the director of the whole festival. Like we play when I say we play. More food, more wine. It's like there's 7 people at the table and there's 7 bottles of wine here. This probably isn't the right ratio. We go play the gig with Giacomo Alla and Doug Little, Kevin Washington, myself. And afterwards, these cars back up and we're like, oh, we have to get out of the way. It's the guys who are tearing down the stage. And they're like, no. Come here, venga. And in their trunks, they have a half a wheel of Parmesan.
Oh my God.
Classic.
And so I was like,
That's what I keep in my trunks.
so
Yeah, right, who doesn't?
Before the teardown, they passed around these like meats and cheeses and you're just cutting and it's like, it's brilliant.
Post-gig charcuterie.
That's right.
It was,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I got to tour Italy.
It was beautiful.
It's on the bucket list.
Right.
I'm kind of curious. A question that's been on my mind for like this season in general has been specifically for like industry folks, how they've seen it change, especially for someone who's been doing it as long as you have.
Yeah.
Like how have you seen it change?
Well, I think there's 2 sides in my mind. One on the performance side, when I was younger, there were so many opportunities to play. In my early 20s to probably mid 30s, if I chose to, I could be playing 4 or 5 nights a week. Sometimes like a coffee shop in my early 20s just for low bucks, or like, here's a pound of coffee, go away,
Nice.
But I see the opportunities being less and less as clubs try to figure out the economy post. For sure post-COVID, but also in the last 15, 20 years, things have changed. So that part of things. And I also think the culture here, when I was in school, people were like, we did sessions like 3 times a week. People were getting together and jamming. And I think that's a smaller community now. I know Whitey's has a jam session. There are a couple of places, but it was...
Riley's playing at Whitey's tonight.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm the drummer tonight.
Great.
For the jam.
Yeah.
So it's like that stuff was so much more prevalent. Now, I'm in my early 50s. It's like I don't have the time to do as much of that. But I love that as part of my organic upbringing. I think the industry has changed. Obviously, labels are closing. I think social media has brought to the foreground the idea that that looking for people in an a la carte way is equally as valid as signing record deals now. People have, like, sometimes they'll have a manager for just I want you just to work the distribution or just the tour or like just the merchandise. You don't have to do, well, I mean, some people are doing 360 deals, but a lot of people are like, I'll do this kind of deal with 3 or 5 year with some sunset at the back end and just help me promote my, because social media does. So I used to tour with this guy, Billy McLaughlin, who's played like Michael Hedges, 2-hand guitar, like playing bass, like this hand's playing bass, this hand's tapping and playing melodies.
Oh, yeah.
We did a bunch of the NACA college stuff, but he had a tour bus and those kind of thing. And I just remember when social media was kind of taking up, one day we were going on tour, he's like, oh my God. I was like, what? He's like, if I give too much time to the brain's brain, I call it the brain's brain, the noise in your head. And he was like, I probably have spent 10, 15 grand a year over his career sending out postcards of when I'm coming on tour and, sending CDs ahead and getting posters it's now you just press a button and you've done all your marketing you need to do, which is like, I don't know how old he is now, but he was older than I was. I was like 23, 24 when I was going out. So I think at the time he was in his mid to late 30s. I think about those people in like the 90s, if they had a 10 or 15 year career as a touring artist, they also spent 150 grand or 100 grand on just mailing postcards, like getting the word out. Yeah. And now that goes, I think it's a balance. There's fewer places or opportunity sometimes, but social media also helps you collect in a different way. And people are figuring out how to monetize. I think that's a bigger deal, It used to be you'd go on tour and sell CDs and that was a revenue source. Like, who wants to buy a CD? Like, what is a CD anymore? Like, what place does it hold in our culture? None. It does. I mean, like, you can put your coffee on it. Cool. Yeah. I can put a hot, like whatever. So now, now in the past, 10, 15 years, vinyl's kind of making a comeback. So that's a commodity. But how do you make money? If you have a tour bus, that's $1,000 or $1,500 a day for the driver and diesel fuel, and everyone in the band gets a per diem. If you're not in like your friend's, minivan, and there's hotels, and at a certain point, you can't ask, a bunch of people to jam in the one hotel room like you did when you were 19 or 22. So how do you monetize the environment so that you're selling some combination of merch? Swag, all those kind of things. And I think people are figuring it out. And a big part of that is social media, for sure.
Yeah, it's more accessible, but it's a lot harder to make kinetic, I guess, like financially.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what kind of what I heard and what I've been seeing is super easy to get into, but the opportunities are like so few. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of my former students who have really strong Patreon parts of their social media, and that just takes a lot of legwork. Like even the Rick Beato and the big YouTube people are like, you have 500,000, 1 million followers. Like that takes time, and you have to do your due diligence to put up that much content. That's a full-time job.
It's a whole job, totally.
So you have to think about, and there's people like Warren Hewitt who have produced like a pro, and those are amazing resources, but they also are selling coffee mugs and T-shirts, and now Sweetwater is selling T-shirts and Audioscape, and everything helps.
I just bought a Gretsch mug.
Oh yeah, all
pretty sweet.
All the stuff. But people are coming up with their kind of niche business models that have legs, and hard work and really good ideas will prevail.
What's like studio work like these days? Has it changed much?
I mean, I think when I was younger, I did more per month. Now it's different. Much like Richard, I turned my house into a recording studio. So my living room is 30 by 16, and on one side is a drum set that's always mic'd, and then there's a Whirly and a Rhodes, and then a baby grand piano at the other end. So I'm busy enough with projects that my world of studio is always recording for what I'm invested in. So when I just got done doing music for the play at the Guthrie, I'll use my studio to record for that, for that project. So I think more people are doing a la carte. I know Paris, and I can't remember her sister's name, but they are King. We Are King. That got huge, and Questlove was blowing them up. And right before Prince passed, they were, getting flown back into town. She was at Berkeley, I think, at the time, or interning for Patrice Rushen. She was getting known, But they recorded their record, which is incredible, like in her kitchen, So like some know-how and some amount of tools. That part is the part that's really intriguing to me, is like, you don't need $50,000 worth of equipment. You don't need an isolated studio anymore. People are figuring out. And even Wolfpack in the videos they do of them playing in a hotel room, it's like all that stuff is very doable with one interface. Like 8 or 12 mic channels. Will it be the best sounding thing? No. But if you are crafty and know how to mix, you can make average tracks sound better than average,
Yeah. That's been like last summer. I've got a little 15 by 15 square foot room.
Easy.
Tracked the whole record in there.
Yeah.
Live guitar, live drums.
Yeah, people should check out, there's a Warren Hewitt, I think it's Huar, Warren Hewitt, Produced Like a Pro. There's a really cool, long, well-done video of him at Sunset Sound in LA, and he's using all their collection of original U67s and U47s, so each of those mics is like, $10, $15, $20, $25,000 per mic. So there's like $100,000 worth of mics, and here's $1,400 Shure mic package, and like a cheapy Octapre something or other. And they put all the mics phase coherence, so like we're picking up the same image. And then in this video, there's a link where you can download the tracks, which is fascinating. It's like I'm hearing $100,000 worth of microphones, and it sounds absolutely amazing. And you hear, $1,500 worth of microphones and the same performance. And if you're A-Bing them, you can hear the difference. You can hear a richness or a clarity, or maybe not as much fizzy on cheap mics. But even he in the video, I remember him saying like, yeah, like I could really mix this. This would be fine,
And then it kind of goes back to like someone who isn't a music, like a non-musician, just a music listener. Would they even be able to tell themselves?
Right.
Like, do they know the difference between, a $25,000 mic and a $100 mic? Oh, I see you. I know you've got opinions.
I'm just eager. Well, because I've seen that same one, and it's eye-opening because they record the same parts, the same drums, right, with a separate set of mics. You got the gazillion-dollar microphone set up, and then the cheap microphone set up. And when they made the tracks, they played them blind for professional engineers who were hanging out. So in other words, they're swapping between the two mixes, but they're not telling people which one is which. And not everyone picked out the right ones. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I noticed that here at the studio. I know Jeff has gone through the same thing. I mean, there are times when I record something through like this $2,300 Neumann, and it sounds like ass. And then I record it through an $80 SM57, and it sounds amazing, or whatever, like whatever works, I have a set of interfaces here. I don't want to name any Universal Audios, but one of their interfaces keeps breaking on me every 6 months, and the thing costs $3,500. And to get through a session, I borrowed Jeff's less than $200 Behringer 8-channel preamp thing, right? I mean, just the cheapest. It's the one you buy when you just need something to have in case your friend's $3,500 interface blows up.
Yes.
And it sounded phenomenal. It sounded great. And so it's just, boy, a lot of stuff doesn't matter these days.
Yeah. Again, it's more accessible.
The barrier to entry for making good music is extremely low, which is frustrating on one end, but it means that if you have real talent, like you have the opportunity to be heard,
And let me just point out, not on camera is Richard at his desktop thumbing through reverb ads. So let's just be clear about that.
I'm sadly entering all the money I've spent last year into my taxes, which I had to file an extension.
He's actually looking for his next drum set.
Right?
He's looking for a 1300 Ludwig. That's what he's looking for.
Looking for like a $4,000 original Zildjian A cymbal from the 60s.
Okay, before we run out of time, I really want to hear your take on success.
Big question.
That's a big one. That, well, I'll try not to be too poetic.
You can.
Please.
I've experienced in my life the reality that life is unequal, it's unfair, it's unbalanced, and it's shorter than you think. And so primary in my goal and my constitution, part of what fuels me is the idea that I want to advocate for myself in a way that allows the most percentage of my life, the most percentage of my days to be something that fills me with joy, whatever that is, for me. So the idea that, and I used to talk with students, this triangle, it's a reverse triangle. If we start with, if there's three, like a pyramid, and the tip is down, on the bottom is the smallest part of the pyramid. And as you're a young musician, you kind of have to say yes to a lot to get invited into the next level and prove yourself. And that middle range of the pyramid is things that I want to do with friends, but pay okay. And then the top, I should say when the pyramid is right side, the biggest part is the part you have to do. The medium is what you're willing to do, and the top is what you want to do. When you flip it, hopefully as you progress as an artist, the smallest part of the pyramid is what I have to do now, if it's on its point. And when you get to the top, now the base, the big part, is what I get to do, I choose to do with my friends and my music tribe. So that's success to me. That feels, to make a living as an artist is hard. These days, I feel like, I know plenty of incredible artists, world-class artists, who would rather only play their original music and get a job as a server, or get a job at UPS. That's fine too. What is it that you need in your life for you to feel at peace with your choices and give yourself time to do your artistry? Sometimes it's like, I'm going to get a job being a banker. And if you can manage those things, that's going to provide you incredible opportunity. And you can buy the $3,000 cymbal, no problem. And for me, in the age that I grew up, I was like, if I can do music and get paid, I'm not as particular about the kind of music in my early 20s. I want to prove that my skill set and my artistry can drive the narrative. So I spent a lot of time learning music that was not super important to me, but I was honoring the fact that someone was paying me, So to me, that for me at my age, that was really important and defined success of I want music to be the thing that I'm doing for most of my money. And does that include, for a while I gave after school lessons for kids and things like that. I felt my self-assessment, I wasn't great at working with 9-year-old kids or 12-year-old kids, so I kind of stopped doing that. So that's one measure of success, maybe. I have friends who have not toured a lot, but they're some of the most skilled or musical, or they have a capacity to surprise me with their choices, and they're just very content. I have other friends who are very successful and are touring the world. It's what does it mean? I had one friend say to me that was touring the world, you play the Ice House, you play there, you play the Dakota. It's there's a handful of clubs in town that I play often. And he's for me, after, he's older than me, for him, after 25 or 30 years, playing in Berlin and then flying to Japan and then coming back for a festival in Paris or in Antibes or something like that. It just, for him, those are the normal gigs. So then he's going to other things. I remember talking with, what's his name? I can't remember. The guitar player who was playing at Joe Sensor's sports bar, and in come Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis before they start their session, invited him over to record, and then he ended up to be musical director for Janet and Cher and all this stuff. And I was talking to him on a gig one time, and he said, he was older than me. He's in my era, there were no cell phones. There weren't computers, no internet. So they all had literally Crown Royal sacks of quarters. So when they'd get off the tour bus, they could run for a payphone. And he's like, I had to check in with my 12-year-old daughter. Like that was the only way to do that. Call from Japan or Russia or something like that. So you give something up to help fulfill his version of success, you know? So I think it depends. I go back to the central idea of you. One of my mantras is be fearless, be humble. Like if I come with my complete effort and I'm also bringing a humility that obviously I don't consider myself a prodigy, so I'm well aware there are people in the world with such natural gifts. It's kind of frightening, like the Jacob Collier world. It's just like, that's mind-blowing. And if you set your barometer the wrong way, you'll get full of envy or frustrated because you're not at that level. Or with one fucking tweak, you're just inspired and thankful this human being's alive and playing their music their way. And you could, so I'm cherishing his success, or we can throw any number of people. Isabel Spalding, it's like, I love that how amazing she is. We get to be alive at the same time and watch her do that. Are you kidding me? That's insane. Or Corey Wong, or, you know, like all these students from McNally are now grown human beings and playing their asses off, touring all over the world. Like that's amazing. And we all have connection to it. So that's success, you know? But I think that idea of like, I want to do my art. I want to be in a creative space in physical terms and also metaphorically around other artists who are growing and challenging. And I want to celebrate people's success. Someone doesn't have to fail or get less for you to get more. And I think you know, the Twin Cities aren't that way. New York was, I had an apartment there for some years, and it always felt like it's always competition because it's so cut through. Here I feel like people are more willing to like make space in the community for new voices. I think that's really exciting. I think when you invest in other people and support them, they don't forget that. You know, genuine support without strings. I don't need something from you. I just want to give you this thing. Then when they get a step up, they'll be like, hey, we should loop him or her into this project. It'd be cool to have Jeff come in and just co-produce this one little thing. It's just like little nibbles, you know, we all just kind of float around.
Yeah, we all float. That's, you know, that's a sentiment that we've heard a couple times on the podcast. It's like Minneapolis kind of floats, everyone kind of floats up as the city itself floats up. That's really interesting.
I mean, Doc has talked before about Minneapolis, and it was based for a long time out of Toronto, them both being similar in that way, like very diverse musical cultures, and everyone's kind of cross-pollinating. And he was like, at one point he was like, maybe it's because it's so damn cold in the winter. Like I remember growing up when I was in high school, I mean, in elementary school, I went to elementary school with Noah Levy, who's this amazing drummer. And I remember being in high school and like, you know, we'd ride our bikes over to someone's house and like, hey, let's try to play Take 5. Ooh, it's in 5. It's great. And like, most people I don't think would say like, oh, Jeff and Noah, but we used to jam, you know, it's like, he's an amazing drummer who I don't get to see enough. He's kind of in different camps.
Oh, he's hard to find. I don't see Noah play too often.
He's amazing.
Always amazing. Totally.
Yeah.
Hard to find.
Hard to find.
Man, I'm just sitting in this.
Oh,
This is good stuff.
it's good stuff.
Yeah, this is a really cool community, and I think about that a lot. I think, this podcast has made for really cool connections and really cool conversation and cool opportunities too. Like, I think I see that in the podcast too, the idea that like us getting to know other people and just kind of having a reason to get you to come sit down and
Was
talk
it Brandon on here, Commodore?
No, we haven't had Brandon.
though.
We should get Brandon on here. That's not a bad idea.
I'm trying to think of who it was. Maybe it wasn't him.
I think he was on Secrets of the Scene. There's another podcast that he was on.
Maybe.
Or do you think it was a different
I'm trying to think of who it was. I just think this town is full of really amazing people, and you know, now, and as I said before, in my kind of early 50s, I see now how the Tony Axtell gifted me such like, hey, come over, kid. I'll show you these amazing Yellow Jackets records. You should know about Jimmy Haslip. You should know about Otilber, you know, or whatever. It's like, I think there's an opportunity, and you have the Corey Wongs who are out touring internationally. You have Stokely who's still doing gangster work, it's like, and taking an all Twin Cities band with David Billingsley and Jesse Larson and Johannes and Brandon and Ash. It's like, it's crazy. That's all coming from the same center. And then on a weirdo night, beautifully, at the Ice House or somewhere else, you see someone that tours with, Kenny Holman, who tours with Corey Wong, is now playing with someone who tours with Stokely, is now playing, and they're just at the Ice House or the Dakota or Crooners or something. It's incredible,
I feel so lucky to be here, like in the city where all this beautiful, amazing music exists.
Yeah.
And it is cool, like how everybody is kind of like crossing over. I think that's what is making the music and the connection so good. Like everybody knowing everybody and everybody making music together is why it is what it is and why it feels the way it does.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this is hopefully in no way a shameless plug, but this is the ethos. This is like the driving. When I was hired to build this music production program at Hamlin. And what I want it to be, what it's starting to be, is giving these students of Hamlin, but also non-traditional people around the community are taking these classes, like regular, DAW classes, mixing classes, studio classes, is that after they take the classes, they now have access to the space. So there's all these people from the community coming there to do work. I just need a room that's quiet, like this space. I just need an ISO room for 4 hours. Can I come use it? And I feel like that's part of it too, is like we can all help each other with resources and opportunity, because the technology part is becoming so important. It's not a separate thing anymore. It's kind of what is expected of you. Like, what do you mean you can't record your own horn part or your own vocal? Like, now everyone's just sending files around the universe. Like, can I just send this to you and you can just write all the string parts and record them all and send them back to me? It's at 48 and it's at this tempo and there you go. It's off and running. Same with vocalists. It's like, I'll put on a bunch of BGVs in my own studio. Even if that studio is your closet with a couple packing blankets. Like, to think about how to do it, this is like just slightly below what they were doing originally in the Snake Pit at Motown. It's like everyone was figuring it out. You know? So.
Yeah.
It's also improvised, so implemented, just like, we're making it happen.
I'm going to figure out how to make all this shit work.
Yeah.
Trust me. Diligence. Like, I'll figure it out. Yeah.
That's how you do it. That's real.
That is real.
I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
I'm feeling like I got to get home and make some music. Where are we at with time? I think maybe this could be a good time to wrap.
28:05 on the camera. So.
Wait, left?
No.
Okay.
You got 2 minutes left on the camera.
Okay, perfect. We're right on time then. Okay, and like no shame for plugs at all. That's usually how we end the episode. So if there's anything else that you want to plug.
I'd say, my world now is kind of three-pronged. I play a lot in the Twin Cities still. I'm teaching at Hamlin. And if you're interested in some of the classes, you can easily find me there. And I'm also doing a lot of composing and sound design for theater shows. This one just opened, Skeleton Crew. It's an amazing piece by Dominic Morso at the Guthrie. And then I also recently was down in Florida doing a piece called Intimate Apparel. That one was more stride piano based. This one is she's a playwright from Detroit. So her, in the way that August Wilson keeps everything very communal, her idea about and direction in the stage is like, I want the music to be of Detroit. So Motown-y, there's a lot of reference to in her stage direction about Jay Dilla. So not that I'm not saying that at all, but just the challenge of like, in my own brain as a person who grew up playing Motown, as a person who grew up playing jazz, which is Detroit, which is Bob Hurst and Elvin Jones and Jerry Allen and Kenny Garrett and all those people, the legacy that some of that can get somehow filtered through my own particular turnstile and come out as this, hopefully art-filled, attempt at a hip-hop score for this play. So that's up now through June 9th. And then I have another play kind of in the works that it will be at Yellow Tree Theater in Osseo that is a really, really well-written by Austin Van. She wrote it, and she's starring in it about Josephine Baker. So now I'll go home and start writing orchestral charts that are kind of kitschy in 1920s, 1930s.
Cool.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I want to be there. I want to see that.
Absolutely.
It's been so much fun.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here.
thank
Let's
you.
all go home and make art.
Richard, clap.
Exactly.
Very nice.